Hi, Larry Sanger here. I had the bright idea of reading the news to you. So now it is May 6th, 2015, 5:15 p.m. Eastern Time, and here are the top 10 stories. Businesses added just 169,000 jobs in April according to payroll processor ADP, while economists had expected 198,000. The jobs trend has been downward since November, when private employers added 284,000 jobs according to ADP. Each month's ADP survey has been lower since then. The ADP figures come ahead of the U.S. Labor Department's more comprehensive non-farm payrolls report on Friday, which includes both public and private sector employment. Action Economics estimates that the Bureau of Labor Statistics report will show 225,000 new non-farm jobs created in April and a 5.4% unemployment rate. The low job creation is due to the collapse of oil prices and a surging dollar, the ADP report says. Economists polled by Reuters are looking for total U.S. employment to have grown by 224,000 jobs in April, up sharply from 126,000 in March. The unemployment rate is expected to drop by 0.1%. Next story. The city of Chicago will pay a total of up to $5.5 million to dozens of people tortured by the city's police in the 1970s and 1980s, along with other reparations. "We are strong enough to say we were wrong," Mayor Rahm Emanuel said after the vote. "Chicago will finally confront its past and come to terms with it." Chicago and Cook County already have paid about $100 million in settlements and verdicts for lawsuits related to disgraced former Chicago police commander John Burge. Burge was fired in 1993 and later convicted of lying about police torture in testimony he gave in civil lawsuits. Victims' lawyers estimate that 120 people were tortured by Burge and his detectives, but some of them have since died. Reparations from the $5.5 million approved on Wednesday would not be available for victims who have already had payouts from the city in civil lawsuits. Next story. Iran's Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said the U.S. can't do a damn thing to harm Iran's nuclear facilities, and that Iran would not hold nuclear talks when the U.S. is threatening military action. Speaking to a group of teachers, Khamenei said that negotiating under threat is unacceptable. Iranian media reports don't clarify what threat Khamenei means, but Senator Tom Cotton called for a limited military strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. Tensions have risen recently around the Strait of Hormuz, a 21-mile Persian Gulf outlet through which 30% of the world's seaborne oil shipments pass. After Iranian naval ships last week seized Maersk Tigris, a cargo vessel, the U.S. military recently began escorting American-flagged ships through the strait. Iran's potential deal with the P5+1 world powers faces a self-imposed June 30th deadline for finalization. Next story. A House bill is aimed at stopping warrantless spying on Americans. The bill is in line with the anti-surveillance views of 72% of Passcode's influencers, a group of more than 90 security and privacy experts. The bill's sponsors said it would force the government to get a warrant before it can access databases containing American data. A bipartisan trio Representatives Ted Poe, Zoe Lofgren, and Thomas Massey sponsored the bill called the End Warrantless Surveillance of Americans Act. Next story. In response to new legislation, Uber has ceased operations in Kansas. Uber abruptly stopped operating in Kansas after state lawmakers overrode the governor's veto on legislation that imposes stricter regulations on Uber and other ride-sharing services. The bill requires that drivers have comprehensive and collision insurance on cars subject to liens and undergo background checks with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. The bill makes it impossible for Uber to operate in the state, Uber said in a blog post. Farewell, Kansas, until we meet again, concluded the Uber blog post. Next story. Andreas Lubitz, the co-pilot suspected of deliberately flying a German airliner into the French Alps, appears to have tried to rehearse the fatal dive during an earlier flight on the day of the crash. The French preliminary reports say Lubitz repeatedly set the Germanwings plane's altitude to 100 feet during its outbound flight to Barcelona from Dusseldorf on March 24. Brief twists of an altitude dial would not have been noticed by passengers or controllers because they were quickly reversed and the jet had already started an authorized descent. The new information in the 29-page report provides further evidence that the co-pilot crashed the plane intentionally after locking the captain out of the cockpit during the return to Dusseldorf. French prosecutors are widely expected to move ahead with a criminal indictment despite some diplomatic pressure to transfer the case to a German court. Next story. In politically important Iowa, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker leads the race for the Republican presidential nomination, a Quinnipiac poll found. Rand Paul and a surging Marco Rubio were tied for second. Bush was in first place in a national NBC Wall Street Journal poll, while Rubio had more first or second place votes than anyone. In the Iowa poll, Jeb Bush was way down in seventh place with just 5%. Walker had 21%, while Rubio and Paul each had 13%. Asked which candidate they definitely would not support, 25% of likely caucus goers named Bush, and 20% said they've ruled out Christie. Paul came in third with 13%. Next story. Home Depot wants to accept Apple Pay. Home Depot, Inc. has the goal of offering Apple Inc.'s mobile payment platform at its more than 2,000 stores, which would make it the largest retailer yet to accept Apple Pay. If it pushes ahead with the plan, Home Depot would join retailers like Macy's Inc. and Whole Foods Market Inc. in embracing Apple Pay at stores. Infobitt has links to videos about how Apple Pay works and how it works in a real-world test. Next story. SpaceX tested its escape system for astronauts Wednesday, launching an unmanned Dragon crew capsule from Cape Canaveral, Florida. Simulating a launch pad emergency, an unmanned Dragon capsule was launched to an altitude of several thousand feet before arcing over for a splashdown in a test of the new emergency escape system. You can watch the SpaceX Dragon abort test in a video linked from Infobitt. 8 Super Draco engines mounted in pairs around the base of the 810 capsule ignited, reaching a combined thrust of 120,000 pounds and boosting the spacecraft from 0 to 100 miles per hour in a second. The engines burned for just 5 seconds or so, enough to push the craft away from an impending booster failure in an actual launch attempt. Coming off the launch pad, astronauts would experience 5 Gs, a lot to take, but easily survivable by trained pilots. For Wednesday's flight test, the Dragon was heavily instrumented with sensors to measure multi-axis acceleration, temperature, sound, and pressure, and a variety of other factors. Additionally, an instrumented dummy was on board to measure the forces astronauts would experience in a launch abort. Final story of our top 10. An independent report concluded that Patriots personnel, quote, participated in a deliberate effort to release air from Patriots games balls after the balls were examined by the referee, unquote. Directly implicated were Jim McNally, a Patriots locker room attendant, and John Jastremski, an equipment assistant. Some salty text messages between McNally and Jastremski implied some tampering may have taken place. The report said that while star quarterback Tom Brady was, quote, at least generally aware, head coach Bill Belichick was not implicated. The report cited McNally's disappearing into a locked bathroom with the game balls for enough time to deflate them with a needle. The report was authored by attorney Ted Wells and the firm Paul Weiss, Rifkin, Wharton, and Garrison. And that's it for today. I'll be interested to hear if you find this useful. Please let me know in the comments.